that's why now, instead of attacking the narratives or controlling the narratives, which they're losing control over, they're starting to attack the people. Right there, it's easier to say Russell Brand is a crazy rapist, conspiracy theorist. Sarah Bills got kicked out of the Navy for they said I was a substance abuse, which is whatever.
Welcome to another episode of Twice Told Tales podcast. With us today is Sarah from DD Geopolitics, and we're going to have a discussion about propaganda. Welcome, Sarah.
Thank you for having me. It's me and my dog today, as usual.
What's your dog's name?
That's right.
Beans.
Beans? Oh, what? I don't know if I want to know how I got that name.
Well, her name is Bisou, like French for kiss, but she's just not, that name does not fit her. She's not, it's not a girly girl. She's all over the place. So it just became Beans, like just because she's jumping everywhere. She's like a jumping bean. So now she's Bean. Here she is.
Jumping bean, which is just a bean with a larval infection.
Yeah.
Well, I've noticed a theme here that like all the like genuine commentators who are just kind of like struggling to maintain their sanity in a world of lies, like animals tend to be a real part of people's lives who are doing that. Like I know Vanessa Beeley, she's like really into dogs, and Eva Bartlett, and a lot of them are like just struggling on the front lines of like this bizarre world we're living in.
Oh, hey!
So
cute. Hi, we have a special guest right there.
But yes, I think I'm pretty isolated because I live alone, and I pretty much do this 24 hours a day. So if I didn't have a creature, then I would probably go crazy, honestly. I mean, you know that when you're in this kind of field, you don't relate to the outside world that well, because the outside world, and in the United States anyway, isn't really in tune with this stuff. And if they are, they usually kind of just regurgitate the mainstream talking points. So I don't really feel comfortable out in the real world, honestly, and especially after kind of what like the doxing and the media attacks. I don't really bother anymore. She doesn't either. Go ahead, go on.
Very big ears. Is she a French bulldog?
Mm-hmm.
Wow, she has huge ears. She's very cute.
That's why she got a French name.
You could call her Rabbit.
Yeah, she does really looks like a rabbit.
So
that's true.
Yeah, well, I think what you were saying about like maintaining sanity I think that's one of the reasons why a lot of people just never accept the reality, because it's so painful to have to separate from that social comfort. And how did the rift begin in your life? How did you first decide that, okay, I got to look into this? And then I
was in the military. And I was like, this is messed up. Like, why is this like this? And me being the type of person that I am was like, well, I'm going to find out. And, you know, as you go up in rank in the military, I say when you get to see how the sausage is made, right? When you go up in rank, you start to see the money. You start to see the equipment. You start to see more so how it affects the people, the sailors' lives, the people that are serving. And you're like, this is so corrupt and gross. You know, and I said a couple days ago, I was in another stream, and I said, you know, I wonder about the people that get through 20 years without going insane. You either have to sell your soul and suck it up and just do it, or you have this tremendous amount of guilt. And unfortunately, I was in the latter group, and I joined in 2009. I think it was about 2016. I started to be like, I got to get out of here. Like, I got to get out of this. Even my superiors were like, you don't belong here like anymore. But so yeah, I question, people will say, well, what radicalized you, which is a strong word, and I'm always like, it was the military, honestly, which is kind of ironic. So
that's something very interesting that you mentioned, because it's like people don't think about systems and how systems like filter people. They always think like, oh, the same people are like representative in all of the systems. So like a major work was Noam Chomsky's work that he partially wrote, called Manufacturing Consent, where he showed that like you don't actually have to have propagandists. You just have to have a system that encourages the people who say those things to want to be on there, because then the people who want to actually represent the truth don't feel welcomed and feel shunned and feel like they don't want to be part of it. And so like, as long as you set up a system that rewards the behavior you want, and that's true in the military or in corporate America. I mean, if you look at like the people leading corporate America, you're not going to find empathetic souls there. You're going to find a bunch of functional sociopaths who like, cause that's really, like you said, like you can't get through it if you're like, if you have normal, if you have a normal level of curiosity and care about the world, like, you know, anyway. So that is fascinating that you experienced that. Did you find anyone else doing that, or were you alone?
While I was serving, no, not really. I was very much alone. I mean, I had friends, and we discussed it, but nobody was as staunch in their opposition as me. But I mean, we have people like Brian Berletich now, Scott Ritter. We've all been in the military, and we're all kind of doing the same thing. So I mean, I guess I'm just unique because I'm a female. I don't know. I mean, those guys are doing the same thing as I am. Really, it's nothing different.
What do you think was the, like, because there are obviously so many other people who are still in the military and doing the same thing, and you probably have noticed that there are some other people who are starting to somehow question the things that they're seeing, but they don't have the courage, or I don't know. I mean, it's very difficult to suddenly, change your viewpoint and have to quit your job and everything. But what is that thing in you and those very, very few people who manage to just leave everything behind and start questioning it and just take a very, very different path?
You're asking what do people that stay in the military think? Is that what you're asking?
No, I mean, like, what is that, the quality in you and those who did quit everything and start questioning everything?
I think you have to have a certain amount of empathy. You know, I deployed on a ship, so I wasn't involved in any sort of like ground warfare. But we deployed, and we were involved in Syria and Iraq, and I was, I was just like, well, why? Like, what foreign policy dictated this kind of thing? Like, why are we? And then I was on deployment, and I got really disturbed. I remember they said, every once in a while in the military, you got to do mandatory training. They said, we have a mandatory film everybody has to watch. And I said, we went down to go watch it. And they're like, you're going to love this. You're going to get so psyched. But put it on, and it's just footage of us bombing with like rap music. And I was like, this is so disturbing. And I was like, that was like middle of deployment. And I was like, I can't understand why anybody would be celebrating this. And there was one other person there with me that kind of felt the same way. And it was just like, it was bizarre. And, we only worked on electronics. So we would, we always kind of tried to rationalize it. But eventually you're like, I mean, we're all part of this machine. We're all helping it continue to function just by serving, no matter what you work on. So I think that it's just a general, I think it's just a general amount of empathy that special effects, a general amount of empathy that got there. I mean, how can you? And at the same point, my sailors and civilians around me are complaining that they can't afford this, they can't afford that, and I'm on a deployment and we're dropping millions of dollars in bombs on whomever, who we don't know. So it's both of those things kind of juxtaposing. I mean, the economy has been falling apart since 2008 with a minor uptick thanks to China, but we've been struggling economically ever since. So it's those kind of two things. Like I always tell people in the America, if you guys realize you have more as a working class citizen, if you guys realize you have more in common with a worker in Iran than you do with Jeff Bezos or a general in the military, we'd probably be a lot further along than we really are.
Yeah, they tend to that tends to be the whole business model now, is just trying to figure out ways to use the government to like take money out of the system, whether it's through printing more money or through taxation or whatever. There is much more money to be made in like legislating spending than there is in trying to convince people to buy something. So you have these, the giant COVID thing was just like a global grift where they just got everyone to buy a phony product that didn't do anything. And they took like years of psyching people into doing it with masks and all the crazy psychological operation. And that was global. And nobody really paid the price for that. And so if you look at that, there's not much difference between that and a war on terror, where it's just the victims aren't everybody. It wasn't like every single person was being targeted as a potential like target for the grift. It was just, poor people in the Middle East who were defenseless and who had their bombs dropped on their houses by snuff film watching sailors.
Pretty much, yeah, hooting and hollering. You brought up COVID. We're probably about to go through it again because the fervor for Ukraine is starting to die down. And if people don't start waking up to the fact that we live in a war / service economy / lobbyist economy, and that we need these things to continue functioning, and an economy that disaster capitalism is not sustainable. Eventually it all just catches up. So we're in the point where we're grasping at straws and everything is falling apart around us. And how much longer can it really go on like this?
Yeah, well, what do you think of the whole, like, since you're running this, I guess we could just skip all of the rest of we talk about the history later, but eventually you got to running this little network of like sharing sort of content that mostly focuses around revealing the lies of this Ukraine situation, the NATO proxy war against Russia, using Ukraine as the cannon fodder. So how do you view, you're very much like against the system now with your messaging, and because you're just telling basically the truth. Like looking at what happened just recently to Russell Brand, which is kind of a fascinating story. I don't know if you saw.
This is what they do. They put you in these catch-22s, right? And now everybody's got to comment on it, and everybody's got to take a side. And you're like, I'm damned if I do, and damned if I don't. So after what happened to me in the media, every single media story that comes out, even about an enemy, is just like, why would I listen to this after what the things that they said about me? So when the stuff came out about Russell Brand, I'm not going to jump on the women are lying bandwagon, but I have a healthy amount of skepticism that is like cautioning me to be like, whoa, let's at least look at it before we start demonizing either side. So I think it's incredible, and it's so detrimental to both people like Russell and women, because we don't know why these women are coming out 10 years after the fact. There's other women that have said the press tried to pressure them into talking about Russell. We don't know the whole we don't know how victimized these women have been, and now we're watching kind of Russell be victimized as well by the media.
Or if you know the guy who makes those video compilations, he had this great tweet where he tweeted out like these headlines about Cardi B. I don't know anything about her. She doesn't wear enough clothes. But like Cardi B apparently like
she's a women's rights advocate. Don't you know?
She brags about having drugged men and stolen their money, like having violated men's bodies. She brags about having done that in the past, and YouTube still monetizes her completely. And then Russell Brand has some like random some like obviously a media campaign that went to try and find some dirt in his past, and then they demonetized him immediately before any kind of. So I mean, she's admitting that she violated, like, drugged men. Like, it's not like Russell Brand says he didn't, but she admits it, and you feels like, oh, okay, we'll pay you.
Well,
money.
you remember when that well, you don't know Cardi B, but even when that whole story came out, there was a whole angle of, well, they deserved it because they were in a strip club. It's like, what you literally just did. What was she wearing? Like,
I know. Imagine if those were reversed. It was like a guy was like, she
I'm
deserved
sorry,
it.
you were in the wrong place at the wrong time. Whoops, you got raped. Like, what?
Wow, that's just it's so ridiculous. And then the idea is like, oh well, everyone's equal. We care about everyone. That's like, this is
No,
anyway.
you don't. It's not about equality or being egalitarian or any of that, or equity or any of that. It's not about that. It's about controlling a narrative. And but I don't want to get too tinfoil hat, but I don't even watch Russell Brand. But I know from just in passing what he talks about. And when one of my partners, Aussie Cossack, is going through the same thing in Australia right now, not with women, but instead, they're painting him as a Putin propagandist, which, I mean,
well, his thing is ridiculous because the reason he got in trouble with the media there is because he just said the name of a guy who was probably a child molester. Like, it was like very likely, and it was just like, how is that? I don't understand. Like, if there was open dialogue and credible accusations, I mean, Russell Brand is now being called a rapist with allegations, and they're doing it in the media, 100% pumping it out of the London media. There's been no trial. There's been no official act. They're just accusing him of being a rapist. So what the Aussie Cossack did is exactly the same thing. He was just exposing the name of someone who was accused of being a child rapist or whatever. And it's like, what's the difference? And this is there's
no, you can't talk about the pedos, only the rapists in the West.
Pedophilia needs to be normalized,
right? Because it's Prince Charles welcomes Prince Andrew back into the royal family, but Russell Brand has to get demonetized. So, when you're a sex offender in the British government, it's okay. But when you're a person speaking out against the British government, they're going to paint you as a sex offender. So it's
it's very clear. Yeah. It's very clear that it's not about women's rights or about the truth or anything. I mean, I like you said, I'm not like a big fan of Russell Brand, and I was pretty much disappointed when he interviewed a so-called Iranian British in the UK who wasn't even born in Iran and who was like had these crazy ideas about Iran and the protests last year and everything. But I mean, I understand also that it's very difficult for people in the West to understand the propaganda against Iran. I mean, a lot of people get the propaganda against a lot of other things, but when it comes to Iran, it's a very complex form of propaganda. But like Cornel West, Chomsky pretty much on a few other things too. But with Russell Brand, I think it was mostly because of his comments on Iran that I thought, well, he's also buying the same propaganda. But yeah, it's not. I mean, there's, like you said, there's not been any court or trial, or it hasn't even been proven, and immediately it's about demonetizing his channel. Well, when you're seeing like a lot of other things going on, but I like to ask you about Iran too, like because I've been on one or maybe a couple of your Twitter circles, and I know that you know Iranians and you talk to Iranians, but tell me about what you knew about Iran and like how did you find, because your stuff on Iran on your channel is pretty good. So actually, how did you find out?
I had a question on top of that. Like, how did you? Because like what she was saying is really true. Because I've gone through my own like travels and as an American, and the Iran propaganda nugget is a very difficult for everyone to crack. Even Palestinian activists, a lot of them don't. They believe all the Save Women in Iran stuff. So how did you? Because I was really surprised when I saw your channel like so clearly understanding the Iran situation. How did you get to that? Did you meet someone who told you that Iran wasn't like you were told it was, or?
I already know that they aren't. Once America tells me that a country is evil and I should hate them, I immediately know that I should not hate them and I should start reading about them. So, I mean, we did it with Assad, right? So in 2011 is probably about the time that I got very, very curious about Syria, because I was like, what the hell is going on with Syria? And then eventually you realize, oh, they're wrong about that too. And then you read about the Palestine and you're like, oh, they're wrong about that too. And this is not just unique to the Middle East or the Levant, but it's very, very prevalent when it comes to talking about those governments, those regimes, right? Because it's always the Iranian evil regime or the Assad dictatorial regime. So once these,
I like the mullahs. People always talk about mullahs.
And it's like, do you guys even know what they are?
Or a rabbi. Like, why don't we call the Israelis the rabbis who are making all the decisions or whatever? It's the same word. Like, nobody even, anyway, whatever.
I always call the liberal Iranians here the Shahs of Sunset, because they're always like so rich, so bourgeois. Like, I'm like, you guys have so much money. Like, what are you talking about? And like, seeing that in other kind of circles, in the Palestinian and the Israeli kind of like that weaponization of those kind of divides between the diaspora and the people that are still there is something that the United States is very good at exploiting. And they'll utilize they manipulate the diaspora from all countries into also being an arm of their foreign policy. So they do it with the Iranian diaspora in America. They do it with the Cuban. They do it with the Armenian diaspora, the Russian diaspora, and
Venezuela for sure.
For sure, they do it with a lot of these diasporas, and then they do it the other way too, where they utilize the Ukrainian diaspora to support their foreign policy abroad. So they do it both ways. So when you start to see the United States vehemently demonizing somebody, that's the time you should stop and be like, oh,
yeah.
So now we have Russia, China, Cuba, DPRK. I mean,
Yeah, but the thing about Iran is, I even see that among like leftists and those who kind of think, the way they talk about the current so-called regime in Iran being evil is that, well, there was a good non-religious government of Mossadegh, and it was toppled by the US. Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's true, but it doesn't mean that the mullah regime is something that the people didn't want.
What happened to Mossadegh? That was our first successful coup, actually.
Why isn't that sorry.
That's our CIA's first successful coup. Go USA. And then they complain, right?
Yeah.
We destroyed.
Yeah, but the thing is, yeah, I mean, there are people who understand that and they blame the US for the coup, but what comes after that comment is that, well, the US mistake was to topple the Mossadegh government, and that's why it's led to the current theocracy that you have in Iran, and it's very suppressive and whatever. You know what I mean? Like they understand part of it, but when it comes to the Islamic Republic, they have all these negative thoughts about and it's, I find it very insulting in some way, because it's like the women in Iran and the people in Iran have like no power, and they don't know what is good for them, or they don't have any no power to determine what they want, and they were just waiting for the US and others to install, I don't know, some government for them. I mean, I find it very insulting, because the fact that there was a revolution in Iran shows you, if people want to get rid of a government, they will do whatever they have to do that, because like Savak, the Pahlavi's intelligence service, was like very, very brutal. They were trained by Mossad and CIA, and they were like documents that are coming have been revealed later on how they tortured the dissidents and everyone who disagreed with them, shows that it wasn't that people were not afraid of something or were not tortured for opposing the government. No, they just really wanted, they were fed up with that Pahlavi regime and they wanted to get rid of it. So they sacrificed, and they finally did. So if even right now, if people wanted to get rid of this government, they could do it on themselves. They don't need anyone from outside to support them.
Well, I mean, now I'll ask you a question, because there's Iran went into isolation, and rightfully so. They isolated themselves, but they were also isolated by the West. Do you think that we isolate, we meaning the West and mostly the United States, do you think that we isolate nations utilizing sanctions in order to then rewrite their narrative? Because we know so little about, let's say, North Korea here, that we only get the information that they're willing to give us, meaning our government. Same thing with Iran. It might have worked to the advantage of the United States, in the sense that they're like, we could tell these people whatever we want to tell them, because Iran's not very outspoken and in a global sense.
Yeah. But the thing is,
blocked, like press TV, like we can't, how do you, anyway.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to say. I mean, I think Iran is still very different from North Korea, and I'm not going to comment on North Korea because I think North Koreans should comment on that. But it's mostly that the world has been isolating Iran and not the other way around. I mean, for example, it's very, very difficult for Iranians to get a visa to anywhere in the world. Yeah. I mean, except for so there's no. It's very. I mean, we do have the internet access, and Iran welcomes tourists from everywhere. I mean, it's difficult for Americans, Canadians, and British people to get a visa, but for almost everyone else, it's very, very easy to get a visa and come visit us. But because there's so much propaganda, there are not many people who wants to take that risk and come visit Iran. But so it's mostly about other countries isolating Iran. I mean, even the academia, I have friends, it's not my personal experience, but I've had friends in different fields of study, medicine and humanities and social sciences, that their papers have been rejected only because they studied at a public university in Iran. Like, they don't even allow you to read Iranian academics' works. The only English-speaking channel that Iran has, which is Press TV, is pretty much taken down from a lot of platforms. I mean, it's very difficult to access them. I think, if I'm not mistaken, even the Supreme Leader's website is also blocked in many places. So, it's the isolation comes mostly from other countries than Iran's policies. So, because they don't want you to, and so the only people that you get to hear about Iran are the diaspora, maybe, or Iranian expats who have been so detached from the society, from everything that is happening in Iran. Some of them are stuck in the first years of the revolution, or even before that. Some of them have a couple of people in Iran living up north, Tehran, where there's a very, very affluent minority that doesn't care about any of the laws, and they're just, living a very different lifestyle from the rest of the country. And they are being represented as people living in Iran, which is really not the majority and everything. So, yeah, they definitely want to control the narrative, and they want to make it very difficult for Iranians to come into direct contact with people in other parts of the world, right? I mean, it's very.
Iran's media Iran's narrative is very dangerous to the West because they're extremely counter-hegemonic, and they don't mince their words. And it's not like North Korea, who doesn't really get involved in that, because almost all of the last 22 years of U.S. foreign policy has been sort of in Iran's backyard. Whereas North Korea's, that happened before that with them. So not 9/11 truth, Iran is the main state news outlet for anyone who wants to talk about problems with the 9/11 narrative. And there are a lot of problems with that narrative. And so they're really a threat to the people who are trying to build this whole fantasy land for the West to live in, and because they bursted on Iran, on Palestine, on Syria, and people, media outlets like Al Jazeera, like Qatar, they all backed the Western narrative on Syria, which is one of the reasons why, like, I used to love Al Jazeera, and then I saw them just straight up lying all on the Syria thing, and it was just like, wow, this is awful. And they're still really good on Palestine. You got to question someone who's going to lie to you on one thing and then tell you the truth on the other, whether you want to take them seriously on the next thing. So Iran's
that's a good point.
Really good.
That's the thing about these issues is you can't be pro-Palestine and then be anti-Syria and Assad. You can't be pro-Palestine and then be anti-Iran. Like those
things, local Palestine activism group agree with you on that, because it's like
that's not gonna work. Like it's just not gonna work. Syria, especially, is in the same battle as almost the same. I shouldn't say the same, but it is in a battle with Israel, just the same as Palestine. So how can you be one or the other? And then Iran is the only thing protecting them both from annihilation.
Yeah, unless you believe in the two-state solution. Whatever.
Iran and Syria are the two main states since Libya was destroyed, are the two main states who back Palestine. And so somehow with the magic of propaganda, the U.S. was able to actually get a lot of the Palestinian diaspora against Assad. Like I was just really involved in that community here for a long time. And then when Syria happened, everyone was just like, they were cool with bombing Assad. And I was like, what the heck? He's your biggest ally who has a voice. Yeah. I mean, the Iranians are so like
that chemical weapons bonkers story really carried a lot of water here in the West. A lot of people believe that to be true. So I think that I know Aaron did like painstakingly debunk that for the gray zone, and he's been doing that for years. But that story really went really far with the pictures, and you know how it is with the West, especially, to get the sensational story out there. It's like shoot and ask questions later. So when the corrections come out, nobody's interested anymore. They've already seen the pictures of the kids that Assad killed, and Assad is evil, and that's it. So I mean that it takes a second to build that part of the narrative, and it takes us like another 6 months to unravel all of that and try to show people the light. And by then they're like, I'm not interested in this. My opinion is solidified.
What do you think causes that? Which is really fascinating to me. Is it like, what is that initial like drug that is released into the veins of people on these stories? Is it simply it being flickered on the TV? Because nobody watches TV anymore. So how is it that you're able to like inspire everyone into some moment of insanity that they may never escape from? Like I still don't quite get it, because there is a lot of good alternative media like that you can go, try and explore what might be real. Do you have? I mean, having been 24 hours a day in this landscape, can you understand why people?
It's the absolution of guilt. It's the absolution of guilt. Western media takes the guilt away from Westerners, right?
Catholic Church. Okay.
Right. So Assad is evil. We have to be there. We are helping those kids. That's an easy thing to digest, right? For an American, it's not very easy for us to digest. The United States is arming ISIS and Kurds in Syria who are acting like terrorists, while they're also arming Israelis who are acting like terrorists in the South. That's not an easy thing to digest, right? You don't want to hear that, because then that places an onus on yourself to react or to speak out against it. So it's easier to just accept the narrative that Assad is bad and we're bombing Syria to save the Syrian people. That's good enough. We're still okay. But if I tell you that Assad is not bad and he's literally the only one holding up the Levant after we destroyed it with the Arab Spring, which was also America's fault, but we could get into that another episode. That's not easy for somebody to digest, because they've never been, they can't, America wouldn't do that. We wouldn't do that.
Yeah. So it's like the Church of Democracy, and DC is the Vatican, something like that.
Yeah.
I think
it's manufacturing consent, just like you said. It's lying by omission, or twisting the story. Or, I mean, even in the beginning of Ukraine, they were sending, and I mean, I've been following Syria since 2011. There were at least like a dozen photos that I was like, that's Syria, that's Syria, that's Syria. And the depressing thing to me was like, nobody even knows that this is Syria. Like, that they're willing to just right off the bat accept that it's Ukraine. I was like, none of these pictures are Ukraine. They're literally using the suffering of Syrian civilians and passing it off as Ukrainian. So it's just, they really do whatever they want with the material and the media that they have. Well, look at what they've done to a lot of us during this war, because the information sharing is getting so much better, right? I can call somebody in Iran right now, be like, is there a protest happening? Or I could call somebody in Serbia and say, is this really true? And they'll be like, no. But that's why now, instead of attacking the narratives or controlling the narratives, which they're losing control over, they're starting to attack the people, right? It's easier to say Russell Brand is a crazy rapist conspiracy theorist. Sarah Bills got kicked out of the Navy for, they said I was a substance abuse, which is whatever. Like, it's just
everyone is a substance abuser in the
right. I don't even drink.
God.
Like, so it's like it. And then now Ossie Cossack is he has always been kind of a Putin propagandist. What do they call him today? A master propaganda provocateur. So it's like they paint the person as bad, right? So if they can make you crazy or me crazy, now we're just crazy conspiracy theorists. Thankfully, the information sharing is getting so much better. So now we can all be crazy conspiracy theorists together. And we get to share these stories and kind of speak out against those kinds of smear campaigns.
But we can't offer the public any comfort. That's the problem.
No, because you're not going to be comfortable. The truth is not comfortable.
I try and convince my like a lot of my relatives who are like who are, you know, on the liberal side of things, and they care about the world and whatever. And you can't. Those are the hardest people to convince of anything. And it's like they just don't. They don't want to know that the U.S. is involved in these things. And for some reason now the right wingers are the ones that are like, yeah, the deep state sucks. And it's like, how did that happen so soon? Like, so now the right is the ones that are open to like anti-war, anti-imperialist messages, and the left are just like sitting there huddled in their like cage, injecting themselves. I don't really understand how that transition happens so quickly. Like, I'm still kind of like with my jaw to the floor.
I don't know either, because I'm pretty far left, but I'm that kind of far left.
Yeah, I know that.
But I think that the left in America really wants to believe that they are good, that they are good-hearted people. They're not, but not for the reasons that are typical. You know, they don't think that what they're doing is evil. They've been told that this is equality, right? That the left is supposed to be liberalism, and the left is supposed to be about being progressive and equality. But they're missing the even in the far left ideologies like communism, equality isn't elevating one class above another class. Yeah. And that's what the left here has done. They've made protected classes, they've weaponized topics, and they've moved completely away from the working class. And that happened in the 90s under Bill Clinton, honestly. So
identity is the most dangerous thing.
Identity
politics. They can just distract everything, because mainly what all those systems are arguing over is how income gets distributed.
Yeah,
and so
it's all class war.
It has nothing to do with colors or sexual preferences, but they've used these things to muddy the water so that they can keep doing their old financial scam and get you to think that progressivism is actually caring about what other people do in their bedroom, which is like, how did that, what?
Right.
Yeah, so we're really not in a very good position there. And that's where I think it's fascinating, where cultures like in Iran and in the Middle East, Islamic cultures I've lived in for years, and I really respect, you know, I've been to Iran for briefly, but I've been in the Middle East and in respective Muslim cultures for a while, and I really respect like how like conservative they are. I mean, that's one of the things where you see that and you're just like, okay, now I understand why conservatism has a value, because it's family oriented, very peaceful, very safe societies. There's like nobody is trying to be crazy. And it's not like they want to be crazy. It's just like they just want to chill, kind of laid back, where everyone just sort of, has their role and nobody's arguing. And whereas in the West, everyone's so angry and upset and trying to do this and that, and it's just like, how is this a better system? Like I've just gradually became more conservative through those experiences, and now I'm like, why?
And it's kind of frightening. I'm like, why am I now socially conservative when I wasn't before? I'm still fiscally communist, but I'm very socially conservative. And I lived in the Gulf for a little bit. And I've been to Levant, and I thought the same thing. So I remember being there and being like, wow, like the being family oriented was the big one for me. Just how close these family units were, even in public, and how involved the males were in their families was just like shocking for me. I loved being in the Gulf. I really did. But it's woke imperialism. Yeah. That's all it is. It's rainbow woke imperialism. Iran, you're backwards because, I don't know, we say that you are. So all of the stuff that your culture entails, that's backwards. You guys are savages. We're enlightened. Have a pride parade. And that's just like, that's the pathway. And it's like, no. And then that's why when I tell people, I'm like, they're like, oh, World War III is about to begin. I'm like, you're in it. This is it. It's all class war. It's all imperialism. I mean, they're making Serbia have pride parades at the Iranian protests over the past couple of days. They've had pride flags and the flags of the Shah, which is like, what is happening? Yeah. And just the. But
that makes Iranians inside Iran hate that so-called opposition abroad more.
And that made Serbia react the same way. And they do the same thing with Russia, right? Russia doesn't allow LGBTQ propaganda. Well, that means Russia's savage and backwards. They live in a dictatorial theocracy where they let the Orthodox Church. And then you look at the West and you're like, but this is the right way? Yeah. It can't be the right way.
The war is winning on you, because you just said, and I did too, that we were like shocked that we have become socially conservative, when in reality, like communism and socialism, neither one of them had anything to do with that. So it was like the idea like that. I mean, Lenin wasn't pro LGBTQ. Burnt him at the stake. So,
are you kidding me? Say they're gonna tell us he was trans. Do not do that.
It's a scam that they make us think that, so that we so that then what they can do is they can then demonize. Like when you hear a conservative person talk about communism, they don't understand what they're talking about. They've been programmed with that word, like socialism, like those commies are like making us get vaccinated. Like there's no, like it's so wrong. And I wish we're going to have a guy on Saturday. We're going to interview this guy who has a real right-wing Trumper podcast, and he's started going after Satara about Iranian things on the internet, like saying that women have to wear black blankets and face muzzles or something. So we just invited him on the podcast so we could
Satara, could you go put on your black blanket and your face muzzle for the listeners?
I mean, I'm looking forward to that conversation, because I think it sounds like he's just brainwashed. He's not, some people that I talk on Twitter, you can feel some people are just brainwashed, or they've been set up to just spread propaganda, whatever. I mean, especially with the so-called Iranian diaspora, that's what they do. But he kept posting pictures of women in skirts, on mini skirts from before the revolution, and telling and writing like, the CIA, that's like, the CIA mistake was to like overthrow Mossadegh, and now you have to deal with this oppressive Islamic regime, and you're oppressed. And I was like, who are? I mean, he was posting pictures of women in chador and saying like, oh look, you're telling me that these women are not oppressed. And I was like, what's wrong with these beautiful women? They want to wear this thing. Are you telling me that they want to wear a black blanket during the summer? How can that make any sense? I'm like, okay. I mean, the only proof that you have is that they wear chador and these people wear miniskirts, so they were like free and you're not. That's the only reason.
He's going to come liberate you. You have to, we're going to come liberate you guys from your burqas and hijabs and all of it. So just sit tight. We're coming to rescue you from the cloth.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like, and I don't feel I feel sad when I hear someone like that, because I'm just like, they just haven't thought it through, and they're reacting to people who want them to hate someone else. And it's like what? Why would you care? Like, we have Amish people living here. How many people are going trying to liberate the Amish women? They dress basically in the same level of conservatism that Muslims do. They have to wear a head covering. They have to wear long skirts that cover their ankles and their wrists. So who's out there trying to? But they don't, because those are people that they're comfortable with, and they view the other people that they're being told to hate and that they need.
Well, the Amish are good Christian, like conservatives that just want to live their lives and be left alone. The Iranians are crazy Islamists that need us to come and liberate their women. Do you see how that works? Like, that's how they do it.
It's like men are telling me to wear this. It's not my choice. It's just men forcing me to wear this. And you have like 70% of the university students in Iran are like women, and they go to university, and you have a lot of overqualified Iranian women in all sorts of jobs and like positions, and they can't decide what to wear. It's just men telling them to.
Right. It's good though.
Yeah. Here's the example that I give, Sarah, which is like, people have listened to this, probably heard it like 3 times, but I think it's a really important way for Americans to understand how dress is cultural. Because there's a whole movement in America, this free the nipple thing, where they want women to be able to go topless in cities. Like, men can take off their shirt in the summertime when it's hot. And they say women should be able to do the same thing. And there's a lot of laws in cities that say you can't do that. But my argument is, like, if, let's say your family members, all the women in your family all decided to do that, young women, or maybe your grandma, you would feel uncomfortable, and you'd be like, put your shirt back on.
My grandma?
Or whatever. I mean, any woman in your, so like, say like all of a sudden that was the new norm in society, and women are supposed to just walk around topless in the summertime because it's hot. It would not feel comfortable at all. And it would be like, this is, you need to dress more like modestly. It's very normal to have. And the only difference in Iran is that culturally, that cloth is on a different part of your body, and that's how they feel modest. And so if you can understand that everyone in the world has different ways of living and different definitions of modesty, just leave them alone. I don't understand, like, how is it that it's so confusing to me. But some people really care. I think,
why don't the Trumpers like Iran if Iran is so oppressive?
Exactly.
Women?
That's what I want. I want to get this guy to like Iran, because it's a conservative paradise. Like,
yeah, maybe they're still stuck on Trump killing Soleimani, like, and that they have to, like, because that's another thing that Trumpers always argue with me about, is like, oh, that was the right thing to do, and I'm like, how? And there's just like, no, it's just the right thing to do because Trump did it. So maybe that's why he doesn't like Iran, because he can't come to terms with the fact that his Lord and Savior almost started World War III and killed a beloved general.
Yeah, that was I don't know what Trump, I would love to know who advised him on that and why he did that. Because after he did that, he realized that was one of the dumbest things he ever did. But I mean, I'm giving him a benefit of the doubt there. But I like, because all the other stuff he did was just kind of like a little provocative, and it was obvious that Kushner and all the people were pushing him to move the embassy and all that. But then doing that was just like, that cemented him as basically.
I don't think that was a one-man decision at all.
Yeah,
it was probably part of it. I mean, Trump was the best president to perform it because there was already so much, like, I mean, he has been portrayed as the bad president, or like being the crazy president and everything. So it was easier to make him do it, but it wasn't a one person's decision.
Okay, I can see that. Like, being like, now's the time to do some crazy stuff. But then what's the excuse with Biden? Because this is off the rails. This might even be even worse than what Trump did in Iran and Israel.
I think the difference is Biden they don't sell him as like an anti, like, they sell him as progressive. So he's in there fighting Putin and fighting the evil. And like, Trump was like the kill the Muslim president. So they were able to like put that under his messaging better, because killing the biggest enemy of ISIS in the world is a really hard thing to do as America and swallow that pill. I mean, that looked, anyone who thinks Soleimani was a terrorist is crazy. He was we were funding ISIS. America created ISIS and Al Qaeda as our own little puppets that we could go bomb wherever we wanted, because we weren't allowed to bomb Syria directly. We had to create the puppet so that we could then put it there and say, oh, we're just bombing this bad guy. We're not bothering you, Assad. We're just bombing ISIS. So, like, I don't know. Soleimani was a hero, and he was against that project, and so I think that's why they had to kill him. And they had to
because he would have went into Syria like the IRGC is now, and he would have eradicated those issues, and there would have been no reason for us to be in Syria to begin with. And that's the thing. People don't even realize the intricacies and the interconnectedness of all of these things. The same people that fought in Afghanistan fought in Syria and then were trained there and then went down to the Sahel. And then those same people, there are also Azov fighters that fought in Syria with ISIS. Yeah. So it's all of these are just terrorists, but just like these little pockets of terrorists just move all about. Same thing with the arms. So, that's why, when I learn about something like Syria, it just makes you start to question everything that came after and before, because you're like, I know we're arming terrorists in Syria. I know what we did in Afghanistan. I know about the war with the USSR and how we forced them into it. And then it's like, well, all of this stuff is just all part of that.
They're even taking selfies of themselves on these like personnel transport planes where you can see everyone in the plane is just coming from Syria and they're heading to like Ukraine. And it's just like, it's like, who pays these bills? How is it that there's not an ability to like trace the payments to these guys to a shell company that's then paid by the...
And they act like you're crazy if you point it out. I'm like, it's not believable to you to say that the same Chechens that fought against Russia are now fighting against Russia, and Ukraine also went to Syria. They're all in the same sort of like extremist pipeline. It's all the same. Even the mercenaries from Britain were like, well, we fought in Syria before, we're coming over to Ukraine. It's like,
yeah, but Wagner's a terrorist.
Right. Wagner's not. They're Nazis. It's
unbelievable. Well, it's a pretty crazy world out there. I guess we'll just wrap it up there. Do you have anything you'd like to tell people, or any other questions that need to be addressed in the last few minutes?
Me? No, okay. I'm good. I'm going to go eat some fried rice and go try to start the next women's liberation movement in Iran. That's what I'm going to do.
Well, now you have a good
with Russell Brand.
Yeah, please.
Russell Brand coming to liberate Satara. All right.
Yeah, please.
Can I print your picture on a little like inkjet printout and then
give it to the Israeli ambassador.
I haven't been killed by men here yet, so maybe
there's still time.
I guess we should actually mention how hilarious it was that the Israeli ambassador was kicked out of the UN
oh my god, I love that.
Going on detention.
It was they don't even understand how ridiculous and idiotic they look. And then you got kicked out.
I mean,
and they asked for his ID card. I love that part. Like, who are you?
The best thing is they wouldn't let him get it. They wouldn't let him reverse course and get his ID card. He was like, "You'll find it on the desk," and they had to go back. And then, as he was walking out the door, the cameraman was like, "Israel's a terrorist! Israel's a terrorist!" And it was like, wow.
Yeah, that was.
I talked about that yesterday with Shabir because we were just so excited about Raisi's speech, and I was like, we just thought it was the funniest thing. But I mean, maybe the world's changing, because in normal world, Israel should have been able to scream and throw bombs in the middle of the UN.
Yeah, so exactly.
She has to make an appearance.
Hey, did you wake him up?
We're too. Yeah, I did.
Yeah, you did. I could tell. He's like,
yeah. So there are 2 females waiting here to be liberated. If you're,
we're coming. Yes, sit tight.
Okay. Did you hear that? We're going to be liberated finally.
All right. Well, thank you guys. And Satara, I'll message you and we'll get something set up, because I want to talk to you about Iran with my an American friend. So that'll be kind of like neat.
That'd be interesting. All right. Well, so tell people how they can find your channels, and then we'll
Please go to my YouTube and subscribe. Please, I'm really trying to build this YouTube. We had a little.
Going to be demonetized or taken away from you. It's going to be.
We're setting up Rumble right now. Okay, so find us on YouTube and also find us on Rumble, Substack, and I am always on Twitter, bothering some government official at DD Geopolitics.
In the description. All right.
Thanks.
Well, thanks everyone for joining us on another episode of Twice Told Tales podcast. Find all the links in the description, and I'll see you again. We'll see you again next week.